All right, everybody. All right, let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Diana, could you please do roll call? Committee Member Shull.
Here.
Committee Member Middlestad.
Here.
Committee Member Huber.
Here.
Committee Member McMorris. Here. Chair Gordon. Hi.
Can you hear me if I do speak?
Yeah, we
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to keep muted unless I have something to say. I'll raise my hand first.
Okay, so that's everybody. Mr. Green, are there any late changes to the agenda?
So acting chair, there are no late changes to the agenda.
Okay. Okay, so we need to approve the minutes from the March 10th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Second?
Okay, the motion is seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. And we also need to approve the minutes from the April 14th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I had one quick question about those minutes, just briefly. I noticed in those ones that we did not note that anyone had spoken during public comment. Is that consistent with what we need to do? We never say if someone did show up for public comment?
If it's an action item that comes out of public comment, then we usually note that. But typically, it's just, we could probably for the next minutes just note that there was public comment provided rather than the boilerplate language that we have in there for the agenda itself. So I think we could do that. If that's
Okay, I
what you
couldn't
so desire.
completely hear that. So we can leave it as is, but in the future, do it differently, or?
Yeah, but my suggestion is, rather than putting the boilerplate language about requesting to speak in the minutes, that we just note that there were public comments from, maybe just list the speakers out, because there isn't any back and forth, there's no action that comes out, but it's probably better just to note that there was public comment received and leave it at that.
Okay. All right, that was my question, but otherwise I would move that those minutes the minutes from April 14th meeting be approved.
Second?
Okay, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Okay, now we move on to the public comment. Is there anyone here to provide a public comment today? Anyone online?
So acting chair, they will, there should be a script if people want to speak, they raise their virtual hand. Is there anything in the script about that?
Not for raising your hand online.
Okay.
Should I say, if you're online and you wish to speak, please raise your hand. Is anyone raising their hand? Doesn't look like it. No? Okay. All right, so then I guess we move on to the business section of the agenda.
Thank you. It's my honor to introduce to you Sunrise O'Mahony, who's the Executive Director of the Watershed Alliance of Southwest Washington. She and her group are under contract with the city of Ridgefield to annually help with a variety of things dealing with watershed, water quality or water, in this case, water conservation. their focus this year is definitely water conservation. That's kind of a general focus that we have going on with the city this year. With that, because of that focus, we thought it'd be an excellent opportunity, as we've been talking through the idea of native plants in roundabouts. Let's create an overlay that says, well, what can we consider? And also, since we've talked about low water usage and low maintenance, what's the water conservation aspect of that look like? So we've invited Sunrise. I don't think we had a presentation. I think it was just a general discussion. I know that there have been a couple of emails this time for back and forth on native plant lists and what one of the nurseries is offering up for native plants. So I thought we'd just do as kind of an open discussion. I'd like Sunrise just to quickly give her more of an introduction than I was able to give. But just a general discussion about what this means, how we can use this water conservation overlay when we start talking about native plants, especially with plant establishment, because obviously having water to establish plants in their first 2 to 3 years is very critical, but what does this all mean? So, and I think, Heather, we had talked a little bit about this last week, and I don't know if there's anything you would like to add before we ask Sunrise just to give a quick introduction, and then we start the discussion.
No, I don't have anything to say at this moment. I'd just love to hear from Sunrise.
All right, thank you. So,
I'm up. The mic's working, right? You guys can all. Okay. It's blue. All right. These are nice mics. They don't echo. So yes, so I'm Sunrise O'Mahony. So I'm the executive director of the Watershed Alliance of Southwest Washington. Are you familiar with, I know you are, but are you familiar with the Watershed Alliance at all? Any of you? A little bit. Too little? Okay, then I'll give just a quick, elevator speech on what we are and who we are. So we are a nonprofit that works in all of Clark County, and right now, currently, Ridgefield is probably one of our biggest areas that we're doing work on, so you're going to be seeing a lot of us in the Ridgefield area. So we do all kinds of work that's all focused on water quality and natural spaces. So that can be from removing ivy like we've been doing in Abrams Park, to planting trees like we've done over at Horns Corner, which is by Beveridge and Acero Apartments Condos. That area there's kind of a little bowl area. So we've been doing plantings there, as well as now we're working at the Pioneer Widening / IQ Credit Union project over right by the dental office by Mountain View Dental and the PT. So we're doing plantings in there as well. And we've got some other projects that we're doing in odd ones all around. But when it comes to planting, that's really been our focus. And we do pretty much every single event that we do has an aspect of volunteers. Sometimes it's all volunteers, like at Abrams. Other times it's a mix, like the Pioneer Street widening one and IQ one. That one is a mix of contractors and volunteers. So we do a combination of both. All of our focus and all of our plants are native plants. And when I say native, because native can mean different things to different people, but for what we're focusing on is native to the Portland, basically this Portland, Vancouver, this region. So it's very hyper-focused and definitely very local on that. And so what that means in connection to all of this is that we're looking at plants that are meant for this area because they're from this area. And so, yes, our climate is changing. And so we are seeing hotter summers, for example, and things like that. So we are adjusting some of that. But again, we're focusing on plants, some of which you guys have in these lists that I've seen you've been working on, or some people have been working on. And so, the idea is that in the first, like Chuck mentioned, in the first, honestly, depending on the weather and the summers that we have and when the winter starts and how much rain we get, ideally you're looking at 3 years of watering, but you can start to decrease that, especially some of these plants that are on here need even less. So the idea is that after 3 years, we're not watering these, that it really does become its own little miniature ecosystem that's meant for this area. And so that's where it definitely has a reduction when it comes to water usage, for sure. And is there anything else that I should add? Do you have any questions about the Watershed Alliance? Yeah.
I know with the climate change, they're looking at the zones excuse me, an 8A, 8B? Have you found out any information if we're moving our local zone to another?
So that's more, if I'm understanding right on that, that's more for like the seeds, the USDA for like,
Yeah.
that like on the seed packets is what you're talking about.
Right, but that
Yeah.
kind of overwhelmed, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
that doesn't, we haven't had any conversations about changing that end of it. We're still looking at native plants. I can give you on a personal level, for my yard, for example, I'm focusing on planting more that are full sun, even when I'm not always full sun. But that doesn't mean, I mean, we're still not seeing that big of a shift because, yeah.
I was wondering if it was affecting native plants.
Not yet. We're still seeing good productivity and good survival rates with the ones that we have. What we're finding is that in the past, we didn't have to water as much in the beginning years, and now we're finding that we have to establish it a little bit more before. But other than that, we're still able to plant them. It's a good question, though, because it is shifting for sure.
So Sunrise, does your organization work primarily just on public projects, or what's the array of projects?
Yeah, that's another good question. So it is a mix. We definitely have public, like some of which I mentioned here, but even the IQ one, or the Pioneer Widening and IQ is a mix. So it's, in a way, we're working with the credit union as well. But we do public, we do private. For example, we have a project out in the Camas area at TSMC. Used to be Wafer Tech, but TSMC. So we're doing a project with them, and that's private companies. We have a program called which is actually very relevant to this, it's called Backyard Habitat Certification Program, and it's actually a program that is Columbia Land Trust and Bird Alliance of Oregon, their program, but we manage it in Clark County. So it's a partnership with those two organizations to do that, and those have a lot of aspects to it, but one piece of it is native plants and trying to look at, again, water conservation with native plantings. So that's with private property. We're not doing the work, but we do the consultation and come out and tell somebody, this is how you can make your yard habitat friendly. It's beyond plants, but kind of focusing on the plants and the water on here. And then we've worked with HOAs in the past, none in Ridgefield yet, but we've worked with HOAs in the past to have green spaces, so we have the capacity to do that as well. We've done consulting for people that are over an acre, so they don't qualify for backyard habitat program. So we'll do consulting with helping figure out what plants can they put in and give them planting lists, more than a plan, or less than a plan. But so we have a mix of properties that we work on. We've also worked at a church, a couple churches, so the Backyard Habitat Program works in schools. We've been working with, I think, 2 of the schools, maybe 1 or 2 of the schools here in Ridgefield as well, to be demo sites. So it's a long story, long answer, but all of the above.
Thank you.
But the majority of our work is on public.
So I know we've talked at the last roundabout, which is the Discovery Drive at Pioneer, that wanted to have a plant schedule that somewhat transitioned from the adjacent wetlands plantings, which Sunrise just talked about. That's where that roundabout is the western part of that wetland planting project. And I believe the discussion at the time was focused on pollinators and maybe birds. As you know, we're doing the big art metal fab piece in there, and currently our consultant is working on a planting plan that will start in the fall, because it's getting a little late in the season to actually plant. And actually, they're planting in the middle of a work zone, so it's probably really not a good time yet. But I guess the question is, now they're focused on Royal and South Wells roundabout, which is not next to wetland per se, although there is one in the general area of that. Are there any differences, I guess, in terms, and maybe I'll just raise this as a discussion item, are there any differences in what you look for with plants depending on kind of proximity of the area, or what you want to do if you want to attract bees or those type of things? And I'll just get that discussion started.
Actually, was thinking about that myself, because it's going to be hot in that area. You're going to have a lot of asphalt, so you're going to have reflected heat. houses, the lighting from the streets, etc. So I think in this case, less is more. And one of my ideas was more using stone, perhaps, instead of large plants, or maybe a few, but not a lot, to give you an interest or something that catches your eye. I just think that, I mean, I live very close to that, so I know what it's like in the summer. It's extremely hot and at times, and I just think it would draw an awful lot of water. I don't know what other people have considered for plants, but again, my preference would be a native plant that could withstand that kind of a heat. Maybe something that has interesting bark in the winter. Is a perennial, doesn't get too high. I don't see really big trees. I know we discussed that. I just don't see large trees in that area. I kind of took a good long look at it. I think that might be more difficult for the tree, but that's what I have been thinking about.
So you're saying that you would, you're worried that plants might not survive in the heat?
Not so much worried, I just think it would be stressful. So we need to bear that in mind in that particular area, more so than perhaps an area that might get more shade like we had just finished with. That's gonna get a little more shade given its proximity, even though it's so large. I still think it has some, there's trees around, it's a different, slightly different environment. And there's the Royal, it's just going to be so warm, it's so open, so you're gonna get a lot of wind, Windy Ridge wineries there. So there's those things to consider, so that's gonna dry things out faster. So that's one thing I was thinking about today and yesterday. And I actually ended up making some, I don't know if it helps or not, but I have a couple of things to show the committee that I thought were interesting, just from my side of the coin, that were simplistic. It used more of a rocks. I mean, you could throw trees in. I mean, it's pretty basic.
So if I could just jump in here for a second.
Yeah.
As I understand it, this part of our meeting is about kind of taking advantage of Sunrise and her expertise about water conservation. So before we get maybe too much into the design of the wells in 15th Street, I'm just wondering if we can kind of go back, because I have a couple questions I wanted to ask Sunrise. One is, I guess it is interesting to think about how those two locations are very different, and we are going to benefit from the one that was just finished selecting plants for over, I keep forgetting, what's the name of the one? I don't keep track of the names as well, but the one that's near Costco that we just finished, not the Costco roundabout, but is it a Pioneer in 56th? Is that what it's called?
Pioneer Canyon Drive in 56th Place.
Okay.
That's the Costco
Pioneer
roundabout.
Canyon Drive, 56th Place. In that one, even though, and Jeff Creel and I did meet to consolidate go back through the plans that we had initially selected and just review them and talk through some more. And even though it's near a wetland, we didn't think that because of where it is and how it's set up with the dirt and stuff, that it would really be wetlandish in the sense of being wet in the winter necessarily. So our plants weren't as much like the wetland plants as they might have been. But I guess one of my questions is for Sunrise is, when you talk about, needing to water them for 3 years, I'm kind of curious about what kind of watering strategy helps those plants to, whether it's at the new one that we're going to talk about or the one that's on Pioneer Canyon and 56th, whether you recommend like weekly very deep watering or a few times a week a little bit of a watering, because I think that is one big thing, is to get those plants to really be solid. I think it would be good for us to understand what you would do if that were your project to undersee, and maybe what happens in some of the areas where you're doing restoration, what kind of watering you would do. I think from a practical perspective, you're planting in bigger areas, so I don't even know how much watering you could do. But anyway, there's my question, is like, what kind of watering strategies? And I guess related to that, I'm also curious in what kind of recommendations you would have for us as we move forward, or even as we revisit our plantings, in terms of like how to plant things so they help each other out and kind of help conserve water, because I think sometimes we need to plant them maybe more closely than we would think we should, partly to help so the plants help each other. So those are my two questions.
Before Sunrise responds, I just want to clarify, I misinterpreted what you were asking, Heather. The roundabout you're just talking about is the Discovery Drive at Pioneer Street roundabout that the committee just recommended to council, and they decided last month what was to go in there. So I apologize, I misheard.
Okay, so it's the Discovery Drive and Pioneer Street is the one that we just recently worked on that's going to have the elevated bird sculpture or something.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just taking notes on some of this. So I have to apologize that I'm not overly familiar with, like, I haven't gone and looked at all of the roundabouts as far as but I can give general and answering to your questions, Heather.
Yes.
For the watering schedule being one of the first questions, I did just ask Chuck because I wasn't sure how the watering was going to be done, but it sounds like there is irrigation at those sites,
Yes.
all of them? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
So, which is good. That makes it a lot easier to water this. Heather, you are exactly correct. We would recommend making it as dense as possible, just because, again, that helps to create some of that shade. I didn't catch your name at the far end. Kathleen, thank you. So, Kathleen, you were talking about the heat island, literally, in some ways on this one. But, the watering schedule, it just depends on the temperatures during that time. When we do large scale, it's very different, like you said, because we are coming in every 2 weeks and doing a more intensive watering. During the summer months, that's the ideal. With this situation, again, it would kind of depend on the temperatures. I don't know which lists. I have a couple lists of plants. Some of these need less water. So, there are some of the evergreen, more hardy ones, like the Oregon grape, for example, and some of those. So, if you did a once a week watering, you'd be in probably pretty good shape. But I would say you would just want to watch it, just because it is planting in a heat, just like you're saying, Kathleen, there's heat all around it with all of the asphalt. So, if it looks like things are starting to kind of go a little bit, south there, you'd want to increase that watering. But because there's irrigation, is it like drip type or underground? It's not like sprinkler type, right?
It's a sleeve that goes into the middle, so we're asking our consultant to actually design what that looks like.
Okay, so you can
based
have
on
it.
the plant schedule that
Okay.
they're coming up with.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of common sense in some of it. You want to water not in the middle of the day. You want to water, taking into account the peak watering times of not wanting to water maybe at 6 in the morning, but coming up with times that make sense, since it could be timed with that. Also, adding mulch is really important for water conservation, because again, you're able to water and then that mulch helps keep that. It also cools it down. Rocks are actually hotter, so adding rocks is, we personally wouldn't advise. We'd advise mulch instead of rocks, just because of the heat on that. And if possible, wherever possible, having any, within whatever the requirements are around height and sewer water things underneath there, having a tree would be helpful. That would also shade, some of that. There are large shrubs that can also work that are not, tree height, but you could be looking at 5 feet. You can always prune them if they're getting too much, but that's more maintenance. But you can prune them. I have a mock orange that I don't prune, so it's like 6, 7 feet tall, but you can easily prune that down. And so there are a lot of ways you can create shade, and these are really like micro forests, micro parks that you can create. If you look up those kind of terms, you'll see there's ones that are tiny. They really do help that heat island effect that's happening. So yes, Heather, in answer to, I think I would personally recommend once a week to start with. I do also think that year 2 and 3, if they look really established and good, then you can reduce that watering. But I think in that first time, we are looking at planting in the fall. We always recommend planting in fall and winter. The sooner, October through March at the absolute latest. October through February is ideal, because then they get a really good watering. Their roots start to grow and pick up that water, and so that can also reduce the watering. So by planting that time of year, that helps. And it really just playing it by ear. If we have 116 again, and hopefully we don't, we may have to water more. If we have a more mild summer, we may be able to get away with not watering as much.
I had a question about the soil, because we have such a clay
Yeah.
And it's obviously, any loam is gone.
Yes.
Right? So do you recommend that that soil be amended, or that, my concept is you would, like we did in the other one, you build it up so you can add the appropriate amount of soil for the plants to survive versus having to deal with clay?
Yeah,
Or
it is
solid
really clay out here
again.
for sure. I mean, anytime, I don't know how much you built up the other one and what the options are with that, but yes, you want to amend it. If yeah, it's going to be all clay, it is going to be very beneficial to add something to it. You could just put a compost layer, and not compost like at your house, but you could put a compost layer on top of that and do it that way. There's different ways, but I would say that doing something to break that up would probably be a good idea. It would just help the survivability to some extent on that, and since it is in the hot sun. But having that mulch helps too. If you have a tree that is not an evergreen, if it's allowed, those leaves when they fall, that can help mulch the soil. So there are ways over time that wouldn't take maintenance to do, and adding the mulch is another way to, it takes longer with the, and mulch I'm talking about is like wood chips, but not like you see in a playground. So it's more chipped trees, that type of thing when I say mulch. Heather, did I answer your questions though?
Yeah, you pretty much did. And I was glad you brought up the thing at the end about what mulch is, because I think that's also something that's confused me over time, and that, wood chips are really so preferred over bark because bark becomes so it repels water, and it gets used all the time in city landscaping, but it's really, it hurts the plants, doesn't it?
Honestly, I don't know. I'd like to say I do, but I would be afraid I'd give the false answer. I know that the wood chip type, so anytime the arborists, cut down the trees and mulch it, that does work better. And it works very effectively for weed control as well as keeping moisture in for the plants. So it has a twofold, and it's way less expensive than buying all the bark chips. But a lot of the bark chips have stuff added to them too. So I would say that the mulch is a better way to go.
Yeah. No, I've been reading more and more about how the wood chips are so much better on so many levels, and there is this, once they get processed a lot, I guess, that especially bark, it just repels water, so water can't seep into water plants. So you're thinking like you plant it, but then it's like dry underneath. And I've seen that in my own property where the former owners had put a bunch of bark down, or a bunch of dark bark dust especially.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's something I pay attention to.
Yeah, and the bark dust has other issues as well, because they die a lot of times. So I mean, I think that those are all ways to try to decrease the amount of water usage that we're doing, and really
And I might not have heard, it's a little hard, every once in a while it cuts out a little bit, but I might not have heard the response about the closeness of plantings, like how closely plants should be planted next to each other to help conserve water. Is that a water conservation strategy, or is it just more getting bigger things closer to smaller things, or?
It's water conservation. I mean, there are other reasons too, but it is definitely water conservation, and it keeps coming back to what you said, Kathleen, and that's, adding that shade and that, shading that area so that then you have that closer together, and you're having, if you just do one plant and then 5 feet away do another plant, you're gonna have a lot of hot areas making up the size, but you have that. So if you put them really dense, the idea is we create a mini forest. And so you really want them to be dense to help with that water and not having that soil be so dark. If you imagine under a tree, you're going to have the shade. The soil is not going to be the same as if it was, out in a parking lot and just a median area or something like that. So the density definitely does help with the watering, or decreases the watering, as well as it helps for the plants in creating a better ecosystem and a better habitat, because you do create little homes for, the bees or the insects, things along those lines. It creates more of a friendly home for all of them as well. So it's has habitat benefits as well as water conservation.
Okay.
Oh, and then how far apart? That depends on the plant. So part of the planting plan that would be worked out on more than, just having a list of names of the plants would be to create those and figure out. And then there's, whoever does that, whether it's, us or a contractor, somebody, they will plan all of that out and then say, okay, here's where you'd want this plant and that plant. And so we'd know how far apart, or you guys would know how far apart to put them, so that we're not crowding them too much, and at the same time, we are crowding them some. Does that answer?
Did you bring a plant list?
Oh, no, I'm just looking at some notes from some other stuff, so
Okay.
I don't know where these.
So, committee member Huber provided, and unfortunately for me, when I printed it out,
Oh,
Tiny.
okay.
7D's website of their native plant selections. And committee member Gordon provided a plant list, kind of a detailed plant list, and she can allow her to go through that, but it was just kind of starting that discussion. Probably do want to try not to have this go into the weeds, literally, but is one thing that I would like to, as we have this engineering standards, and part of the engineering standards was to pay a little bit of attention to landscaping, but not a lot. And so we do pay a lot of attention to street trees. In this case, this is a starting point of what I think could give us a native plant list that we could use for this and future roundabouts as they proceed, because there will be more roundabouts. We keep planning for more, and I'm sure there will be more.
Now, I really enjoyed thinking about that, because I think it's important to look at root depth, how big this is it an evergreen, is it not? Where does it fare best? What is its visual appeal when it's small versus large? And will it, I do like the idea of some being evergreen, some not, because you do have that nice leaf shed that comes down on trees and bushes and around the areas. Although we have to also, from last committee meeting, take into consideration maintenance and what they need in larger areas, maybe not this small one we're going to look at, but the larger areas.
Yeah, and I will add on the maintenance piece of it, there are certain certain native plants that you need less maintenance and some need more. So if it is any maintenance, what you're looking at is if it's one that's going to extend, out a little bit, it would just be literally, trimming that around the edge. So it wouldn't be too much that would be required. And again, there are some that are lower growing. So if the decision is to have it be, lower, there's things like kinnikinnick, which are an evergreen and they cover the ground, they're ground cover. And so, there are ones that you could put in there that, are low maintenance, very low maintenance, that you see a lot, you don't even realize around at businesses. So there is that maintenance piece of it, but it can be.
It was more park and rec being able to access things, making sure they would have a pathway.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, I may be misspeaking a little bit, but would come down to the plan and the actual designing of it. So whoever does that, it's making sure, okay, you need a path that is access for X or Y, and what would that be? And then it's leaving that apart, not planting in that area and making sure that there is that access. Again, these aren't humongous, so we're not talking, so within reason. The other thing you mentioned as far as like the plants and all of that, looking at some of the lists, being that it is clay soil, you definitely want to look at that. So, whereas flowers, I love them, but really looking at ones that are a little bit more delicate you may want to look at something differently, or you could have an area where you amend that section of the soil more, and ones like, like the kinnikinnick and the Oregon grape that can handle a lot more, you might put those in there. So that could reduce it too.
So a couple things, and again, I'm trying to maybe move toward a segue into our next agenda item. If you remember last meeting's discussion, it was really good to have our Utility and Operations Director, Ryan Thamert, here for that discussion. We have started to institute what we call a maintainability review with any of our new designs, and that would include what gets designed in the middle of the roundabout. So our maintenance crews have an option to take a look as, all right, can we actually get in and maintain what you're building? And so that will be one of the steps with the Discovery Drive and Pioneer Street roundabout, is to have Kelly Melroy and his group take a look at you know, they too tight together, or do we have a path to get around to maintain them? And we're kind of leave that to them, since they're the ones that are going to be tasked with maintaining things, but it is a step that we've introduced into our plans that we haven't been doing before. So I did appreciate that discussion. The other thing is with these roundabouts, if you remember with the Discovery Drive one, we have a 20 to 24 inch high knee wall, and they have to raise the ground to at least get the bottom of the ground to be right at about the height of the knee wall, so whenever they plant the plants and then put in the centerpiece, they have to be fully visible so that we don't lose 2 feet. So that soil, and it won't be clay that they add in there, will be fertile soil of some type. So there will be an advantage. Same thing will be happening at the Royal and South Wells roundabout, that we'll be introducing a layer so we just don't start out with clay and say, all right, try to make these grow.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else before maybe we can segue into talking about the other roundabout? And I'm going to ask Sunrise, she's welcome to stay around for the next discussion. I think it'll be big help to have her expertise with this, but if you need to go, I guess. Okay. All right. So I'll return it to the acting chair.
Okay, let's move on to the second item of business, which is continuing the discussion of the roundabout at South Royal and 15th Street.
All right, thank you. So I did attach last month's presentation to your packet. I'm not going to go back into it, but a couple of things have been happening since then. That roundabout does have sleeves for irrigation, and so they still need to be connected in a sprinkler or irrigation control system worked into that, but it is set up for that. Additionally, we have started discussions with Nature Play Designs to actually be our landscape architect for the center of the 15th Royal Roundabout. I have a brief kind of couple of slides that I'm going to ask Diana to pull up on Nature Play Designs. I have worked, I think you've worked with Jane before.
Yeah, I've worked with her for years, and I highly recommended that you guys talk with her and have her look at doing this. She has a wealth of expertise in the area on this subject.
And so I've worked with Jane. She has been both at the City of Vancouver and Clark County. I've done some volunteer projects where I know Jane has worked on them where I've been a volunteer, not where I've led the project. And I think one of the most recent ones is some work at Cozy Camp Park, which is not too far from my house. But we went out to the roundabout today and got to walk through the middle and safely. We got there safely and to and from. And so this is from their website. Just wanted to give you a brief overview of what she does or they do. So this is kind of an overview from the web page. If you notice on the lower one, it's hard to see, but it's a pollinator garden. If you can go to the next slide. Yeah, it is. And so this is kind of another example of what they've done in a smaller setting. They also do bigger ones, but I just chose a few from their website that were the smaller variety. But all of these are, she focuses on native plants, and actually was very excited to have the opportunity to get and tackling this roundabout.
Can I bring up one thing just real quick? On the ones that she does, she focuses on native plants and pollinators. So sometimes they can be pollinators that are not native and vice versa. But one of the things that she can do is, again, what Kathleen brought up, and that's looking at which things are flowering when and the blooms around that. So she can time it a lot better and give you guys something that looks good, year round.
So we're got our finance people, our procurement coordinator, in the process of getting her under contract so she can come to the next meeting. The intent was that we would the committee would give some ideas that we can feed her, and then when she comes to the next meeting, we can do some type of a real-time workshop with her to maybe result in some concepts that come out, for then to come back in July with, this is a couple ideas what you could do. And so the discussion you just had and the discussion we're about to have, I think will be very helpful. And then when Jane comes to the next meeting, I think you'll be impressed. I'm impressed with her portfolio, and I think you will too.
Chuck, I didn't catch the name of the company.
Nature Play Designs. They actually have done nature play areas. I saw that in her. Not that we're going to put a nature play area in the middle of the roundabout, but.
I just was quickly say that I heard her present a year ago a workshop, and I was also totally impressed with her work and her ethic, and I'm really thrilled that the city is, thinking that she's a person we can hire to work on this sort of project with us, because I do think she's got the right combination of skills. So it's very exciting to me that, because I've kind of had her name in the back of my head for a long time, knowing her work, and yeah, this is great.
Yeah, the other thing is that she works incorporating art, so she has also done projects where there is art around it, and so she has that. It's not just plants, since, like Chuck said, she's a landscape architect. She also does pathways, all of that, and can design all of that and give very professional drawings of all of that. So she can really incorporate a lot of what you guys are talking about.
Okay, so that's thing number one. Thing number two is I did get some sideboards from management regarding farm art. We're not going to do anything on the outside of the roundabout. Your focus is obviously in the middle. We took a look at, I know we had former Mayor Onslow here talking about him and Councilor Wells wanting to put farm equipment around the outside of the roundabout. We're not going to do that. However, if they do have some farm pieces that they want to donate for something in the middle of the roundabout, we'd be happy to consider that. So I just wanted to give you that. Don't think you need to talk about the outside of the roundabout, because I'm going to bring you right back to the middle with that. So that's thing number two. And I think we have, Dan provided some AI renderings that I didn't know if you wanted to present those now or have a discussion, or I'm just going to kind of leave it to you as to how you want to run this discussion from here, however you want to do that.
I didn't bring anything. Did you have the picture?
Is this Dan?
Oh, there's got a picture there. So in our last discussion, we were talking about farm equipment.
No, but it's on the screen.
It was kind of alluded to what might make sense contextually to make sense, and so I might go with that farm equipment. So that was kind of what I was exploring, some kind of grain or something to, like you might have harvested here, or and then we have a roundabout that we're considering a canoe. I think that's right.
Yeah, that's at 35th.
Yeah, and so I was thinking along those themes that going back to the horse-drawn equipment, that a wagon was sort of was at some scale that might be visible in a roundabout, and also kind of fit with the multi-function harvesting and commerce, the same way that a canoe was the trade along the river and things like that. Anyway, I was thinking that's why I put that as kind of a center point, and then I was thinking also in terms of having, I think there isn't a knee wall that having some sort of barrier would be useful, because there was some discussion around vehicle accidents potentially, and so if you were to build some sort of stone wall or something, maybe some sort of noteworthy label could be put on there, and I put the incorporation of the city as maybe an idea, but maybe there's another context that would be meaningful, sort of commemorating that history of the city and the farming roots that followed maybe the commerce on the river from hundreds of years before that. Anyway.
I was really glad you submitted these, Dan, because, it got me thinking about how to kind of celebrate the farm heritage of the city in a roundabout if we choose to go that path. So it gave me food. It was kind of just spurred my thinking, and I ended up reading through some of the city history that's on the city website, just going back from the first peoples that were here and then pioneers. And at some point I stumbled on something about how at one point the main crops that were big in town were potatoes, of course, which we know, and plums, which surprised me, and dairy cows. And not to say that there weren't others. They mentioned grains and wheat and stuff, but I think at one point maybe these were the three were the biggest. So I was kind of trying to play around with how to artistically use something like that, because I thought, ooh, plum tree, dairy cow image, potato basket. I mean, everybody knows we're the Sputters. And now that we're freed up from having, we don't have to have like a machinery in the middle, or we could, but it is hard. It's interesting now to think about how to incorporate. I don't know. I guess I'm just curious, like, we haven't as a committee decided that for sure there's going to be a farming focus on this roundabout. Is that correct? Or I know that there's a contingent of people in the community that would really like that to happen. And I think there's some real reasons for that, but we get some to play around with the idea. Am I right about that, Chuck?
He just stepped away for a second. Hold on, he's coming back.
Oh, whoops. Chuck. Not allowed to leave the room. Just kidding, of course.
I was retrieving some water for one of the committee members, so I completely missed what you just said. I apologize.
Well, I just want to know, I mean, just to cut to the chase and not be, do we have to have a farming theme on this roundabout, or that's up to us to make our recommendations on whether that should be the theme of this roundabout?
It's up to you. We just had the former mayor come last month, and Councilor Wells has mentioned farm art for some time at this, but you're not obligated to do that.
Yeah.
Is it possible to, were there numerous or large farms here where you know the names of them? And could they be, you don't have to necessarily have a piece of equipment there, but maybe you could put their names, the name of the farms, somehow honor the farms that were really large? I know Lee is a large owner, he has equipment, we don't need to have the equipment, but somewhere perhaps in the knee wall, we just, Bob's Farm or whatever they are, the main ones, if there were such things.
There were a lot of them. We have the Gary Lottie and the Lottie family is now next, it's just west of Vancouver Clinic, and the land that's being built for Pac Trust used to be the Lottie Farm. Lee Wells still has property and does some farming, but a lot more in the past. We have the Greeley family that was out on the east side, as well as the Boschma family. And so there's a pretty rich farm history here.
Right.
We were talking about something along Pioneer because there's a farmhouse that we're going to be demolishing as part of the Pioneer widening project. It's not really a historic farmhouse. The more historic features of it, including an old barn, are way back that are not part of our project. And whether there was some way to document history, the idea for, at least along Pioneer, putting up a kiosk really didn't resonate with too many people, so we kind of abandoned that, and we're looking at some way where maybe the Lottie family can use the barn and repurpose it for something, but keep the structure there intact to represent that history. So,
It was a thought to
Yeah.
sort of broaden the concept out a little bit and just honor them, honor the big players, so to speak, that they